Hello my fellow Christian fiction lovers, welcome to another video. I'm so excited for today's video because I'm going to be talking about all 6 of Jane Austen's novels. I love Jane Austen, like so much. I've said this before and I will say it again. Well, maybe I haven't said it before on my channel, but if I were going to college just purely for fun, like not for the purpose of getting a job afterwards or having a career in the field, but just purely going to college for fun, I would go to college and I would study literature with an emphasis on Jane Austen. I could literally write thesis papers on her books and just why they are works of art, quite literally. I can't listen to anybody hate on her, so if you don't like Jane Austen, don't tell me because I will block you. I'm only half kidding there. Okay, so anyway, I just recently finished Persuasion, and once I had read all of Jane Austen's books, her 6 finished ones, I might add, I knew that I wanted to do a video on them, just kind of ranking them, talking about their pros and cons. This video could probably be an hour long, but I'm going to try and keep it a lot shorter than that. So we're just gonna get right into it, and I'm gonna start with my least favorite and then go all the way to my favorite. Coming in at number 6 is Northanger Abbey. These are all 5 stars, so this is like the bottom of a 5-star pile. So, you know, just remember that as I'm talking about them. I'm going to go ahead and assume that you kind of know the premise of all of these books. Northanger Abbey, what I liked and disliked about it. While I liked the conciseness of it being very short, I also wanted it to be a lot longer and fleshed out. I read this book over 2 or 3 days. I did read it for a video, so I have more immediate thoughts on it in this video I did last year. I really liked the naivety of Catherine, the main character, how she's so sheltered and just does not know anything about society and kind of the trickery and foolishness that goes on within it, and then she gets to experience it in 2 different worlds, the social circle at Bath and then at her friend's estate. I just loved reading things through her eyes and kind of reading about these people that you kind of encounter. Like, I would say this for every Jane Austen novel. She writes in characters that we all encounter in our day-to-day lives, yet they're just in a different time period. You know, the blabbermouth at the grocery store who can't keep her mouth shut when she's on the phone. There are characters like that in Jane Austen's books. You know, it's just a different setting, if that makes sense. Or the quiet, reserved ones, like some of Jane Austen's main characters are very quiet and reserved. And I really enjoy reading that, and I'm kind of getting off topic of Northanger Abbey, but I just kind of liked reading kind of a fresh perspective of those people that we all see and meet day to day from the perspective of someone who's never met them before and is forming fresh opinions on them. So truly Catherine's newness to society just was so beautiful to read. And that was probably my favorite part about it. Okay, coming in 5th is Persuasion, which I did just finish very recently. So fun fact about Persuasion, I started it years ago and I read about 3/4 of it, but I had got it from my local library and I had to return it and I never got around to picking it up again. So as I was reading it again, I kept remembering, like, okay, this comes next and then this comes next, and then, you know, I did get to the point where I had not read those sections, but I remembered quite a bit of it, like way more than I thought. And as I was reading, I was like, oh, I remember this comes next and this comes next. But anyway, my favorite part about Persuasion is the way that Anne just doesn't talk. So it's the way that the people around her are honestly just so silly and nonsensical and just run their mouths about whatever is on their mind. Like, there's this one passage where she's it's going on about how she's visiting her sister, what was her sister's name? Mary. Okay, so she's visiting her sister Mary, and Mary and her husband and her sister-in-laws and her parents-in-law, they all just like confide these things to Anne about the other people, and they're like, I wish Mary would behave this way, and then Mary is like, I wish my husband would do this or that, and they're all just confiding in Anne about these little silly things, and Anne like is just kind of laughing at them because they're oblivious that she is the like secret keeper, I guess, of the group. But it also kind of makes you think, because Anne makes herself into this person who everyone is willing to speak to and just confide in, and they don't think twice about her turning around and telling the other person, and they just trust her so implicitly. And I don't know, it just really makes the reader stop and think like, would my friends say that about me? And the way she's complimented in this book by those around her, she goes unnoticed, yet when she is noticed, everybody is so complimentary towards her, and just they love her, and not a single cruel thing is said about her by anyone. And I just think it's a great lesson to the reader, and this is where I just need to slow down and not let my literary analysis side take over. But the only thing I disliked about this book is that the ending could have been so much longer. Like, I could have read a whole 100 pages of Anne and Captain Wentworth just figuring out their new relationship, and like, I guess that's spoilers, but I did say you should be familiar with the plots. So just them figuring out their new relationship 8 years later would have been so lovely to read about, the beginning of their marriage, not just the happily ever after that we get. But that didn't happen, so I'll live with it. But anyway, those are my thoughts on Persuasion. All right, next up is Mansfield Park in fourth place. Yes, fourth place. I read Mansfield Park at the beginning of this year. I believe it was the second or third book I read in 2022, this year. And it's long. I think it is like her longest book. I'm not sure. But anyway, I quite enjoyed it. It was so good. What was her name? Fanny. Yes, Fanny. She is such a brilliant main character, and kind of comparable to Catherine in the sense that she's young and impressionable. And there's one part in Mansfield Park in which she's watching her family around her, or yes, her family and just the social circle she's in, put on this play, and she doesn't think it's entirely appropriate. The way she battles with her thoughts and what to say, what to do about it, it's just such a great dialogue on how the young mind perceives things, and she's scared to speak up because she doesn't think people will listen to her and take her seriously, because she's young and the family doesn't quite pay attention to her. They just see her as someone who is there, not really as someone who is thinking and forming her own opinions and would necessarily input on what is going on around them. Just seeing her reason through that, and then going and talking to her cousin, her cousin who she's closest to in the household, and just that whole time, and it's only like, it's not short, but it's not the entire book, but just her wrestling with those thoughts was my most favorite part of this book, and I just so entirely loved it. And it really brings to mind like young girls, young women constantly have to think, will my words be taken seriously, because we are young women, and some people just see young women as not as thinkers, just as people who sit there and don't add anything necessarily enhancing to the conversation, to whatever is playing out in front of them. And her cousins, just the other girls in her social circle, just go along and do whatever is being presented to them, and they don't really sway things. And I love it. The only thing I didn't like about Mansfield Park is who she ended up with. I would have liked her to have just been left unmarried, untaken by the end. That's the only thing I didn't quite enjoy about it, but I'll look past it because it was a very minor part at the very end of the book. It doesn't necessarily, it's not a romance. I would say Mansfield Park is very much a dialogue on the mind of a young woman thrown into a social circle where she is not heard, yet wants to be heard. but she doesn't know how to go about being heard. And I'm realizing that I could probably do a whole lecture on this book, but I'm gonna put it back and move on. Alright, coming in third is Sense and Sensibility. Sense and Sensibility and Pride and Prejudice are probably tied, but I guess if I would have to rank them, Sense and Sensibility would fall a little bit lower. But anyway, so the sisters, the relationship in this book between or among the sisters is just so beautiful, and I love it. It's been a minute since I read it. So I think the thing I love most about Sense and Sensibility is the patience of Marianne's love interest and who she ends up with. It just is it's so good. And the way he sticks it out and then ends up with her in the end after she realizes the guy she was going for was a complete, jerk and not good for her in the slightest. It's great, and great is a terrible adjective for it. It was so much more than great. I guess just the perseverance really touched me, and reading how she eventually, Marianne specifically, kind of comes around to falling for him, and she's not even the main character, yet I just loved their love story. Eleanor, the main character, watching her reading her go through the heartbreak and the suffering that she feels in silence as her sister is kind of going through the same thing, and she doesn't speak up about it at all. She's there for her sister through everything and just remains the steadfast Eleanor that she is at all times. It was just a touching tribute to the quality of sisterhood that Eleanor and Marianne share, and makes me think about how even I can be a better sister and not necessarily project problems onto my younger sister. And it was just great. And my sister also read Sense and Sensibility, and she loves it, so we talk about it sometimes, and we're just like, oh, they're such good sisters, we want to be like them. Except I don't want my sister to suffer the way Marianne did, because what she went through was terrible. Alright, in second place is Pride and Prejudice. I love Pride and Prejudice so much. I read it in middle school, and I don't know why middle schooler me picked up Pride and Prejudice of all books to read, but it got me hooked on Jane Austen, and people say so much about Pride and Prejudice. I mean, it's a very popular book, so I'm gonna maybe try and keep my thoughts short because what I have to say has been said a million times before. The tension between Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth is just, it's enough to live for. It's enough to live another day knowing that their love story exists and can be read over and over and over again. Pride and Prejudice is the best romance that Jane Austen wrote, because it truly is it's a romance. That's what it is. Some of her other books are less romance, more educational in a sense. I don't know if that makes sense, but just kind of more of a dialogue. Whereas Pride and Prejudice, it's a dialogue and a romance, but yeah, I'd say the dialogue is about romance. How about that? So yeah, I love it, and I can't do it justice how beautiful it is. Alright, and then in first, we all saw it coming, is Emma. I adore Emma. I've read it 4 times. I'm planning on reading it again very soon. Oh, the story of Emma is very near and dear to my heart. I wrote a full essay on Emma. I compared Emma, Harriet Smith, and Jane Rochester? Yes. I did an analysis and comparison / contrast of the 3 of them in an essay in high school, completely from memory. I did not have to reference the book once when writing that essay, and it was very complex. Anyway, I don't know if that's necessarily something to brag about, but it is a bragging right for me. So basically the thing I love the most about Emma, there's so many things, but what I love the most is Emma's character development. She is one of the best character developments that I have read in the history of reading. She goes from this very self-centered, selfish person who thinks she has the intentions of others in her heart to a person who is selfless and caring and truly does have others' best intentions in mind and at heart. So every time I read Emma, I love watching her start thinking she is this certain amazing person, and then by the end becoming that amazing person and humbling herself and just unpacking these layers of her selfishness that she didn't even realize existed within her. It's beautiful, it captures my heart, and I just think it is a wonderful lesson of self-examination and never giving up on changing yourself and becoming a better person and recognizing that you can always become a better person, because at the beginning of the novel, Emma thinks she is basically perfect, and she is perfection in Highbury. Nobody can attain her status, her level. Nobody lives up to Emma. And by the end of the novel, she realizes that those who she believed beneath her are actually far above her, because they're willing to humble themselves and recognize their weaknesses and where they fall short. And she was not willing to do that at first. I could keep talking about this forever. Sometimes I really do think I should pursue a degree in literature analysis. But anyway, that's my thoughts on Emma. I don't have a least favorite part. Every part of this book is perfect. Oh, and the patience. The patience of, oh my gosh, his name is completely slipping my mind. Knightley, Mr. Knightley. Okay, his patience and perseverance in at first being Emma's friend and then becoming something more, just guiding her and kind of taking her by the hand because her father really can't. Just showing, gently being there for her and being her friend, and not like chastising her, but not berating her when she makes a misstep and starts to realize that she's not perfect. He is the best friend and love interest, the best man in all of Jane Austen's writing. Truly. I need a Mr. Knightley in my life. Alright, well, 20 minutes later, according to my camera, those are my thoughts on all of Jane Austen's books. I didn't talk very long about Pride and Prejudice because I haven't read it in quite a few years and it's due for a reread, so yeah. I kind of hate to admit it, but I have actually spent like sessions of time just analyzing her books, and maybe that's not what every teenager does for fun, but it's what I do for fun. And when I read a Jane Austen book, it reminds me of why I read, because the elegance and the humanity that she puts into her novels is truly one of the most exquisite things that you will ever read. And I feel badly for the people who won't give her a chance because she's just labeled as a romance writer. She is so much more than a romance writer. This has become an exposition on literature. I think I just need to end the video now. If you want to hear more, please tell me and I will do more. Like, I could full on analyze one of her books in a video. But anyway, let me know the Jane Austen books you've read in the comments, your thoughts on them. If you agree, disagree, I would love to chat. Just love to. Love to. It would give me no greater joy to chat about Jane Austen in the comments with you. So, thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, please give it a like. And if you want to see more content like this, go ahead and subscribe. And I will see you in my next video. Until then, bye!